Welcome back. In this video, we're going to take care of the UI that you can see here, where we can select the different colors and then, well, draw with those colors. Currently, at this point, we will not be able to then actually draw in the color, but we will at least prepare the UI for it. And then in the next video, we're going to add the actual functionality. So let's get started. Therefore, inside of our activity main, where we have our image button and our drawing view, we will require a linear layout in between, which will contain all of those colors. All right. So therefore, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start creating a linear layout, and then I'm going to make changes to the constraint stuff here. So linear layout with wrap content and wrap content in both directions. Now this linear layout should contain a couple of elements, but before that I'm going to give it an ID so that I can actually adjust the UI accordingly. So LL paint colors. So I'm going to call it LL, standing for linear layout. All right. The orientation should be horizontal because I want to make sure that the items inside of it, so those image buttons, so these will be image buttons, that they are next to each other, and this is what I get by using the horizontal orientation accordingly, of course. And then I need to add constraints. Okay, so the constraints, the thing is, what we want this to be is, we want this to be to the bottom of our, so let me see, constraint bottom to top of the brush. So this should be underneath our IB brush. Okay, so this should be on top of the brush, and then it should be to the start of the parent and to the end of the parent. So end to end, start to start. So it should be directly on the edges of the parent on both sides, right, left and right, and then it should be underneath this drawing view. Okay, so that's what I want to have. That's why I need to add top to bottom of here and use the drawing view as the right element. The thing is, if I do that, now I get an error because I say that this linear layout should be in between the brush and the drawing view, but the drawing view thinks that it should be on top of the brush, and the brush thinks that it should be, well, it doesn't even have the definition where it should be in terms of the drawing view itself. So we need to change that, because now our drawing view should be at the top of our linear layout. So here, let's add LL paint colors here. And also let's make sure that our image button at the very bottom, which was our selector, you can see the image here, is going to be top to bottom of the LL paint colors. So here, top to bottom of LL paint colors, and that should do the trick. So now if we look at the design, we can see, well, it's barely seeable. There's just a little dot because our linear layout doesn't have any content yet. So let's make sure that we add an image button in there, and I'm going to copy this image button in here, get rid of all of the constraints, change the ID to no ID at all because I don't need an ID for those image buttons. I'll tell you why in a bit. And I want those buttons to be 25 density pixels towards both directions. Okay, these image buttons. With a little bit of margin, I'm going to keep it 2 density pixels this time. And the image that I want to use is going to be a different drawable. So I'm going to create a pallet underscore normal. So what is pallet normal? Well, let me quickly create a new resource for that, because it will just be a new file that we're going to create. So an image view that we're creating here. So let's create that pallet normal and let's design it. So it's not going to be using a selector as the parent view. It will be a layer list, because I want to have a list of items that are layered. And in order to achieve that, what I will need first of all is of course going to be the namespace of Android. Okay, let me look at the code only, and then let me add the layer list items in there. So how that works is, inside of a layer list, you can have multiple layers, and each layer is an item that you're creating. So I'm just going to create a new item, which will have a certain shape, and this shape will be, and let me put that inside of the opening bracket of the shape, will be a rectangle. So here, shape property rectangle, and then I want to have a stroke inside of it. and the stroke will have a width, and not the color, we'll add the color in a second, but a width of 2 density pixels, and then a color of a gray color. So here, hashtag FF, and then a couple of 9s, so 6 9s in total. That will create the stroke for me here. And this will just be a gray line. Okay, so it's a rectangle and it has a gray line. You can see that here. That's the form that it has currently. And then I will have another item in there, like so, with a shape. So you see, we have a layer list where we use 2 items, and each of the items has a shape or is a shape. And here I'm going to have a stroke with a width of 2 density pixels as well as a color of this gray as well. So let me just actually copy this stuff here. And then I want to have a solid background. So the solid background should get a color that we're going to override manually. Okay, but for now it's just going to be this color having 8 zeros, which will just be black. Okay. And I want to have corners. So here, corners with a radius of 10 density pixels. Okay, so this is basically going to be the structure here. Let me clean it up a little bit here, get rid of unnecessary line breaks. So here we have the layered list with an item and another item, and each item is just a shape. And you can see that, well, you can barely see it here, but there's just this little corner around here. And this is really just basically going to create this effect that you see here, where we have a square with a circle inside of it. And yeah, that's basically it. So that's what we created here. And the circle does look like a circle here, pretty much because of the size that we have, because it's the same width and height for each of the individual items that we're using. So that's the palette normal, but then there is also the palette pressed. And by the way, what we can also do, but in order to make sure that the padding is going to be 0 towards all directions, we can add padding 0 dp towards all directions, like so. Because otherwise, the thing is, the padding could be ending up by default being not 0, and that would create a way too distorted view. Okay, so here I'm just going to add padding being 0 for the main item, so for this first rectangle shape. And that is pretty much going to be it. So let's go ahead and duplicate this new resource drawable that we just created. So copy paste, give the second one the name of pressed. You could also call it selected, because this second one will just be the selected version of it. And I want to make one small change here, and that is that the color here will be a bunch of 3s, so 6 3s after the double Fs, as well as here, or here at the bottom, this will also be this color with 6 3s. So the idea behind this is that this will create a different effect where we then see which of the colors was selected. Okay, so it will be highlighted, so to speak, and that's what this palette pressed should then take care of. All right, so inside of our activity main, we can now use this palette normal. And now what I want to happen is, for every single item, I need to assign a tag. So, and by the way, is this the right image view? Yeah, it's fine. Here we don't need to fit, by the way. That's just something we did for the image view that we created earlier. And what I'm going to add here is the tag, which will be a color that I'm assigning to it. Okay, so I'm going to create a bunch of colors. Let's go over to the colors XML file, where you see we have a couple of colors by default, and I'm just going to add my own colors in here. And this is really going to be the colors that we are going to use in our app. You can see that here we have the skin color, black, red, green, and so forth. And you can use the same colors if you want to. You can, of course, also use very different colors. Okay, so just play around with the colors that you like and put them into your application. Of course, you could go as far as adding a color picker, where the user then can select a color from a palette, but that is something that you would need to use a third-party tool for that, or I would recommend to use a third-party API for that. Either way, coming back to our activity main. So now we have our first image button, and now what we will need to change here is going to be to assign a color, because currently it has a tag that has a certain color, but the color of the button itself, so the background of the button itself, is not going to be that color. But we can do that. So we can of course assign the color. So here add color, and it was this yellow color. Okay, so this will be our first image button, and we're going to require multiple ones of those. So let me add the second one, or actually let me start in the same order that we have in our app. So this one will be the color skin. So the first one will be skin. Then the second one will be black. And we need to change that for the background as well as the tag, because we're going to use the tag in code then later in order to figure out which button or image button was pressed, and then change the color accordingly. So the color of our stroke, because otherwise we would have to add IDs here, and we would have to individually create a set on click listeners for each of those buttons and so forth. But luckily we have a good way around it, and you will see how to do it later. So you will find another way of handling click events. So that's pretty useful. All right, so then that will be red. Let me add another color. That one will be green. And you see that using linear layouts, right, where items just are next to each other. By the way, this is what we're getting as of now. You can see it here. Okay, so this is the form that we are creating. By the way, this is what this palette normal looks like. All right, so then we have green. Now let's add blue. And for the color as well, for the background, then let's use yellow at this point. Well, we had it there, we didn't have to add that. And then I'm going to add the color lollipop in here. Lollipop makes me think of a song. Okay, lollipop. And then of course the final, which I'm going to call random, and we called this color random as well, but it's going to be this purple color. Okay, but later, so you see here random, later what I want to happen is once we click on this button, it will just give us a random color. That's the idea behind this button or this tag random or color random. Okay, so at this point, if we look at our design, you can see we have all of our colors in here. Okay, so how do we get access to these individual buttons? Because it's, well, quite a lot to process there. We have so many different image buttons and we are not using their ID. Well, the cool thing is we can use their position inside of a linear layout. So a linear layout is basically being treated like an array that we can access its indexes of. So let me show you what I mean with this. So I'm going to create a new variable, image button current paint. So it's going to be a global variable, which is going to be of type image button, and at the beginning it will be null. Okay, so then when we want to use it, and that would be, for example, inside of our onCreate, where we're going to set the default color at the beginning, I'm going to set up the image button current paint to be using our linear layout colors. So in order to use them, we need to make sure that we are preparing the linear layout. Okay, so let me just quickly set that linear layout up. So val linear layout, and the name will be paint colors, will be found via its ID. And this time I'm going to use linear layout like so. And I'm going to find it via r.id.ll paint colors. Okay, so this will be the linear layout paint colors, which is this entire linear layout that contains all of those colors, right? It's this linear layout, which if you look at it is on top of the image button, which contains all of these different image buttons. So this linear layout, out of that, I would like to get the position 1, which will be black. Okay, so linear layout paint colors at position 1 as an image button. Because the thing is, inside of a linear layout, you can have all kinds of stuff. And here, what we're saying is we want to use the item at position 1, but we want to make sure that it's going to be treated like an image button, which the items inside of the linear layout are, all of them. And at the same time, we need to import something. So here, we need to import this view get, Android X Core view get, which will now allow me to get a view inside of a linear layout. And the view that I'm looking at is the image button at position index 1. So if we look at our activity main XML, what is index 1? So image button here, this one with a skin color will be index 0. And this image button here, which will be the black color, will be index 1. Okay, so that's what we are getting here. And now what I can do is I can assign this color to be the color that we're going to use for our application. So here we can set the image drawable to be, and here we need to pass a drawable that we want to use. So we can get that from the context compat get drawable, and we need to pass a context as well as the drawable that we want to use. So the drawable that I want to use is the pallet pressed. Okay, so what is the pallet pressed? Well, it's this layered item, this drawable item. And what does that even mean? Like this pallet pressed, let me show you real quick. And I believe with one, it's not going to be super visible. So currently black is pressed. Let me select a different one and look specifically at how the red surrounding, so this gray around the red, so the palette looks like. So now if we select 2, now the red one is selected. So you can see now here, we can see that it has a different grayish color, which means that now it is selected. Even though of course the color itself is not set yet, but at least we set the image view for that image button to be this drawable palette pressed. So we overrode it from being the normal palette to be the palette pressed. Okay, so that's it for this video. And yeah, that's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to then implement how we can click on those buttons and then accordingly change that they are pressed, as well as make sure that the others aren't pressed, and also actually select the color so that we can draw with that color. So see you